is, I don't know if you noticed, but the other day, last week or so, Curtis Bullock, who is the CEO of the Salt Lake Board of Realtors, posted like common mistakes up on the Salt Lake Board of Realtors Facebook group. I in turn around and put them on our Facebook group. But then so I went through, there was like 71, and we're not going to go through all 71. So, breathe easy. So, but I took all the ones that looked like they were Repsy or addenda type mistakes, and then we're going to talk about them. So let me do this. Let me move this over here. So I'm looking at the screen and not looking over there. So the first one I tried to, he had like 71 different lines, but a bunch of them I kind of clumped together as kind of one topic, and I'll talk about it. It says, so that he's got wrong signatures on the Repsy, right? I mean, that happens where, sometimes you send a Repsy to the wrong person to sign. They're not reading it. People, one of the problems with electronic signatures is they call it the Apple effect. The Apple effect is known as when, you download an app or whatever on your phone, or when you open up your iPhone or, any phone for that matter, and then they give you terms of service, you just sit there and accept, you hit the button. So they call that the Apple effect. In fact, there was an experiment by a developer, I think he was from Sweden, Switzerland, one of those over there. And this guy created an app. He put it free on his, it gave the app away as a free app. But in the terms of service, so all these people agreed to clean 20 public toilets in Europe. So, it was an experiment to prove that people don't read these. So anyway, so you're going to see a lot of that in real estate when you're sending over electronic forms. So anyway, wrong signatures on the Repsy, or that's an invalid contract.
The other thing I think happens quite a lot is not only the wrong signature, but like my husband's name is Richard Stephen Love.
Right.
It goes by Steve, but all documentation has to be Richard Stephen because Richard is his first name.
Right.
And a lot of times he'll sign just Steve Love, and that's not correct on a legal document. So I think, one of the things you have to do is make sure you've got the proper names of everything, so you're not correcting it by 5 or 6 addendums when the lenders get involved.
Right. Yeah, and I do that too. When I fill it out, when I do a buyer agency, I ask them, what is your correct legal name? And try to get that up front. I'll tell you a story. Becky's on the call. We had a situation where, we set her up her payroll as Becky Sheese, and the first time we paid her, it didn't go through because her name is Rebecca. And so it wouldn't have matched. It did, even though we had the account number, for some reason, that particular bank wouldn't match the name and send it back. So anyway, so that could be an invalid contract. You got missing signatures, right? How about that? I mean, missing signatures, like for example, a husband or wife, so he's got husband or wife didn't sign the Repsy. So like you can have a Repsy, initialed by everybody, the signature's missing one of the spouses, one of the addenda is missing a spouse signature, whatever, missing initials on one page of the Repsy, causing a dispute. So most times these aren't a problem, except when someone wants out of the contract. So that's the key here is, bulletproof in your contract, so that, if you have a seller, and they got multiple offers and they're receiving better offers than you, I mean, don't give them an easy way out by missing a signature. It's like, come on, your client, you got to go back to your client and go, hey, you know what? I missed getting one of your signatures, and because of that, the seller canceled the contract. By the way, who do you know that's considering buying or selling a home that I could be of great service to? That kind of stuff. I mean, that's like, oops, don't do that. So language on the Repsy crossed out, causing ambiguity. I mean, that's another one. We don't cross anything out ever. I know the lawyers say no, it's perfectly fine. But in our practice, what we do, if you make any change, you do it with an addendum. If there's boilerplate language on the REPSI that you want to modify, you simply get an addendum and clarify what that language is supposed to say. So sections of the REPSI left blank. I mean, don't leave things blank. Put a 0 or NA in there, right? So because if it's blank, it's causing ambiguity. So, and then my other, all-time favorite is TBD, right? TBD. I had an offer, I had a little condo listed, and, we received multiple offers, as you can imagine. And, one of the offers had a lot of TBDs, and they were asking for closing costs, so they were out. We went with an offer with no closing costs. And so, but in my email, when I sent an email over saying we went with another offer, I told the agent that, hey, look, one of the things that, obviously your closing costs hurt you, but, when I see TBD, you kind of move to the bottom of the pile, because that just tells me it's an incomplete contract. And, I don't, what else is missing? Did that mean you didn't get really pre-qualified, or pre-approved, right? And so, these are all things that, just, basically fill out the contract completely, right? Like on the front page where it says, if exclusions are none, don't leave it blank. Just write the word none, right? If there's nothing to be excluded, write the word nothing or none, things like that. And then where you're doing the stack of money in section 2, right in there where it says, seller finance, earnest money, new loan, seller financing, cash at closing, don't leave those blank or TBD. Even the seller finance, if the seller financing is 0, write 0 in there, right? 8.3B1, write 0 if it's to be 0, right? Just fill it in. Just fill it in, right? Another item that's a common mistake, checking acceptance on page 6 of the REPSI, then say checking counter on an addendum. Let's say you receive an addendum or let's say you receive an offer and it's got one addendum number 1, and addendum number 1 is asking for closing costs, let's say $5,000. Well, the agents will actually check acceptance on the REPSI and then counter on the addendum, and then send a counter offer to modify the closing cost amount. Well, that's, because the addendum was part of the offer. So if you're going to counter offer, then you're going to counter offer the REPSI, because addendum 1 is part of the offer, right? So you check counter on the REPSI, and then seller presents addendum number 2. You check counter on the addendum, seller presents addendum number 2 as a counter offer. So you don't accept some, reject others, counter others. Whatever you're doing the same thing all the way across. So if you're going to do a counter offer, you counter each document. If you're accepting, you accept each offer, addendum, each document. And if you're rejecting, you do the same thing. So, just
I think we all are, Gary.
What did Gary say?
He says, I'm guilty of this.
Oh, yeah. That's why we're having this. Well, this is why Curtis said he was making a short list and he had 71 items. I'm like, well, I'd hate to see the long list. So, so those are things, just be real careful. And then, so any thoughts, questions, concerns on this stuff? So if not, I'll move on.
I think that the checking of the acceptance of one part of the contract and countering another. I think agents are confused. They think that if they counter the whole offer, then everything is still in play, but it is, until you have a signed contract.
Right. Even though only one item might be being modified, but you don't have a contract.
And I think that's where people get confused. They think that, all of this is solid. We just need to counter on this one thing. But you have to counter the whole offer because you have no meeting of the minds yet.
Right. Yeah, you don't have a contract. right? Contract is offer, acceptance, conveyance. So, so the next item is accepting an offer or counteroffer after acceptance deadline expires, right? Causing a dispute, right? So, you know, you can counter past the acceptance deadline. You can reject past the acceptance deadline, but you cannot accept past the acceptance deadline. So let's just think of it in a visual way. If you have a 5 p.m. deadline, and remember, this isn't a response deadline. I think this is where a lot of the confusion comes in, that this is a response deadline. Well, it's not a response deadline. It's an acceptance deadline. So, so basically, if you read the language in the documents, it's the same language in the REPSI and the addendum. So it says that, so essentially, here's a great visual for you. If the deadline is 5 p.m. and at 5 p.m. on the date of the deadline, the offer is poof. The offer no longer exists. So therefore, it cannot be accepted because it doesn't exist. There's nothing to accept. So, but you can counter past that, because here's the way, watch what happens. So if, let's say you receive an offer, your seller loves it, there's, for whatever reason, they cannot sign it until 6 o'clock and your deadline's 5, but they want it. So they would have to go back. If you want to accept an offer as it's written, but you're past the acceptance deadline, you have to create a counteroffer addendum that simply states that seller agrees to all the terms as written, and then have a new acceptance deadline in the counteroffer. So that what the counteroffer is doing is say, we love everything here, but here's the new acceptance deadline. And so, and then if the buyer go ahead and signs and accepts inside the new acceptance deadline, you now have an executed contract.
So that's preferable than putting that in the line item addendum?
Well, that's what you're doing. Yeah, you would create a line item addendum.
Creating a new acceptance deadline instead of putting that in the line item addendum, right? Because I see a lot of people that say acceptance deadline is extended to 9 p.m. on Tuesday.
Right. Well, that's yeah. I mean, it's effectively the same thing. Whatever you write in the addendum counter offer, as long as the buyer accepts it, you now have a contract. You can even modify the contract, and if the buyer accepts it, it's still an executed REPSI. Okay. But the point is, you could say buyer and the seller agree, the acceptance deadline is now extended too. But you're already doing that by going down below and putting in the time and date of acceptance.
Right.
So by putting in the addendum that says, seller accepts all terms as written, I mean, that's absolutely clear on what that means. Put an acceptance deadline below and they sign it and we're all good. We're all good.
I can see where that would be a little bit more efficient to do it that way.
Well, it's clear in the intent.
Right.
So, that's a big one. And next one is canceling the REPSI incorrectly, i.e. not in time or not in writing, causing an earnest money dispute. So I get this question many times. Well, can I just send an email? Well, it depends. What's in the email? Is there an attached document? Because, agents just want to type in the body of the email, my buyer cancels the contract. Well, that's well and good, but what does the REPSI say? Section 18 says notices, except for the provisions of Section 23, all notices must be in writing and signed by the party given notice. So if you send a notice, think about that. You're not a party to the contract. So how can you cancel it? The only people that can cancel it are a party to the contract. And they have to do it how? In writing, signed by that person. So unless your client's going to walk over and sign your computer screen to put their signature in the midst of your email, well, no, you can't just send an email. You can't just send a text. You have to send a document signed by that party that states that they are canceling. Now, I recommend you do not use an addendum for that, because the problem with an addendum for canceling is there's two signature lines. There's a line for acceptance, rejecting. So if you send over a cancel and the other party cancels it, well, now you got, and how do you interpret that? So, because remember, a notice is not an agreement. A notice is simply a one-way document, where an agreement is a two-way document where both parties have to agree. When you're canceling, you're not asking for an agreement. You're notifying them. It's just simply a notice. So that's so be careful with those. So not using a limited agency consent form when needed. We don't practice those. We can practice one broker, two agents. So if there's a listing that somebody else in the company has and you have a buyer, I'm good with that, because the buyer and the seller did have their own representation, even though I represent both. But the odds of them talking to me are slim to none. So that be careful of that. Let's see, Maria, how do you accept a backup offer? And what docs, if any, do we need for that? Just sold a townhouse with multiple offers. Two people asked to have their offers held in the backup offer. Yeah, so we do have a secondary backup addendum in the MLS. However, if you're the listing side, my advice on the seller is not to put backup offers in writing. If you're the buyer, you strongly want to be in a backup position in writing, so you can secure your position. However, what happens is the seller. So we've had this situation where there was we had a primary contract, we had a secondary backup offer in place, signed by all parties. So in the event that the first party failed, the secondary contract became the primary contract, to the rights of the buyer the right to cancel it. But then a third and better offer came along. Of course, the seller's chomping at the bit trying to get to that third offer. But so, if you have a secondary backup offer, a third and better offer both the primary and the secondary would have to fail before the seller could get at the third and better offer. So I recommend you don't do that in writing. Just say, hey, we'll sit on your offer, and just tell them that's the way it is. It's a seller's market, sucks to be a buyer's agent. And that's just a reality of the market. So, but that's in the best interest of your seller, is not tying your seller down to somebody that had a secondary offer, right?
And then having to deal with said seller.
Right.
When the offer comes in and says, no, you
Yeah.
got another backup offer.
Sorry.
That one.
Sorry, we signed that other one, and that offer you want, the odds of you getting to that third offer are slim. Right. So does that answer your question, Marie? Yep, I saw. Thanks. So apparently it did. So, so where were we? So not use. So I'm okay with one. But if you're one agent, one buyer, simply use an unrepresented buyer disclosure. You have the buyer sign an unrepresented buyer, and also too, I like in the unrepresented buyer, I like them to sign the unrepresented buyer disclosure. I like them to sign the buyer due diligence checklist, because that's a disclosure. I like them to sign the FOIA protection, get an inspection. And I also like them to sign the wire fraud disclosure. Although we're not representing them, those are just simply disclosure, right? And so just remember what disclosure does. Disclosure protects us in a court of law. So what if the buyer said, hey, well, judge, I always say, pretend you're in court answering a judge, right? So if you're in court answering a judge and the buyer says, hey, they didn't tell me, then you go, well, judge, let's see, we got an unrepresented buyer. They clearly understood we didn't represent them. We have a buyer due diligence checklist that has a myriad of items that the buyer is now on alert that may arise in a situation. Then we have the FOIA protection, get an inspection, even though it's an FHA document. and I keep threatening in my spare time to create a generic version of that, you know. So, and then the last but not least is the wire fraud disclosure. Because if something happened, if your email got hacked and this buyer wires, $100,000 to the wrong location, we don't want anything to do with that. We want to put that on a 10-foot pole and hand it back to somebody. So by getting all those disclosures signed, even by an unrepresented buyer, although we don't have a duty to disclose all them because we don't represent them, but I think it's a really good CYA, right? Another one, especially from agents like you, Marie, to come from other states. Marie, did in Washington, did you typically table fund?
Marie,
So,
you can unmute yourself now and talk.
right.
Table fund, I'm not sure what you're saying about that.
Well, like here in Utah, like when you go to settlement today, typically it funds and records the following day. So in
Oh,
other words, when you go to the title company, does money change hands? Does the seller walk out with a check?
no, it's the same here.
Okay. Okay. So I moved from Florida. So go ahead and mute yourself again, guys. We're getting the echo. So I lived in Florida before I moved to Utah, and we table funded there. And so everybody went in and everything had to be done. Everything got paid right there on the spot. So, we go ahead and mute them all, please, Deb.
I did.
Yeah. So, so if you have a buyer moving from out of state that comes from a table funded state, let's say they come in on a Friday afternoon to sign documents, they're looking for the keys on a Friday afternoon. Come to find out, Monday's a holiday. They're not even going to get possession until Tuesday. Oops. So make sure that you are absolutely clear that you explain Section 3 of the REPSI. Section 3 of the REPSI is settlement, closing, possession, right? And it explains, what settlement is, and it can take up to 4 days to close. The reason why the REPSI has 4 days is because if Monday's a holiday and it'll fund and record on Tuesday, I think they personally should change it to 1 business day, because I recall using that because the lender couldn't get it together in time. We went in, settled. We obviously we didn't complete the settlement because all the loan docs weren't there, or I forget what happened, but we just were dragging our feet on recording and funding. The seller side's jumping up and down. I'm praying to God this thing closes. It's like a $1.4 million deal, and it finally did fund. But I was able to use that to my advantage and a disadvantage to the seller. I mean, it really advantaged the seller anyway because we closed. But if it were 1 business day, we wouldn't have been able to do that. We would have been in default, and that would have gave the seller an advantage. Dry funding states, never heard of that expression, but include Alaska, Arizona, California, not New Mexico. Because the closing process is slower, the funds aren't dispersed right at the closing table. Yeah. So anyway, so just be aware of what your possession deadline is too. I mean, hey, you might have agreed to 48-hour possession and not even be aware, and your seller isn't aware of that. And they show up with a truck. I mean, oops. Oh, I'm sorry. Sucks to be you. You can't move in for another couple of days. By the way, who do you know? So no, can't do it. So
all boils down to agents need to read the contract when they're on
yep,
the listing side or
yep.
on the selling side too.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah. So anyway, so thoughts, questions, concerns on that? So okay. So next one, multiple offers. Seller puts the property under contract with 2 buyers at the same time. Oops.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wah, wah, wah.
Right. Yeah, that's about one of the worst things you can do for a seller. You know, they're going to owe somebody a property, you know, and just pray to God one of them fails. You know, quickly modify your seller disclosures to cause both of them to cancel or one of them to cancel. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
Do people really do that? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, they think it, so an agent that's untrained thinks they're putting one in a backup position.
Oh, okay. One little piece of paper off.
Yeah. You're in backup and they accept it. So, you know, that could be a problem, right? So counteroffer is not withdrawn before accepting another offer. That's another way it happens. So let's say the seller sends out a counteroffer, but before the buyer accepts the counteroffer, they went ahead and accepted a second offer. Then the buyer, without withdrawing the first offer, and then as long as the first offer accepted the seller's counteroffer in the acceptance deadline, you now have two contracts.
That's true.
So I like the next one. 10 different addenda, including with the REPSI, confusion as to what has been agreed upon, right? So yeah, that's a mess. You got 10 addenda. Yeah, you need to basically get addendum number 11 or addendum number 11 and create clarity. Scott Stein, who worked for banks, you know, he was an REO agent for several years, and every subsequent addenda he did, he actually clarified everything else from all the previous addenda. Every one. I mean, he didn't need to, but I mean, you know, it was absolutely clear what they were trying to do, right? So another problem, and this one here is not necessarily a contractual mistake, but you know, subject to sale contingency not happening, causing a domino effect, right? And two can't, you know, if one buyer does it, if one, you know, I've been involved in the largest train of transactions I've been involved in was 5 legs. We were the last of a 5-legged transaction, and so. And all the way down the line, the first transaction had some FHA buyer, you know, with 3% down back when FHA was 3%. God, I missed 3% days. It was so easy to calculate the down payment, right? When the FHA down payment was 3%, you could take an agent and go, what is 3% of $287 and 200,800 or $287,543.87, and an agent could spit out 3% of that. You know, they knew the down payment. But now 3.5, you're like, dang, gotta get the calculator out. So anyway, sloppy language in an addendum causing a dispute. Now we have over 40 addenda in the MLS. The odds are great that you don't need to handwrite and create an addendum. We have them. You know, we have over 40 addenda. So, and then on our site and part of the REAP program, we have Know Thy Addenda video series. I think we go over, I think it's either 9 or 11. I don't know if they've ever gotten up there. We'll have to double check that.
I
know I
think
did
the
11.
last 2 have not been put up, but I'll put them up today.
Yeah. And so we have, and I went through and created an a video for the 11 most common addenda. You know, although there's 40, I mean, there's many of them you'd never use, you know, things like that. And so, you know, but we did the 11 most common ones. So, and then when in doubt, if you're trying to write that language, you know, shoot me a text. You know, the odds are great. You don't have to write it. You just fill it in. Now, there's 2 sets of documents we have, right? There's the Division of Real Estate, the state approved forms. They're on the Utah Real Estate site. The other one is, the other group of documents come from the UAR. So the UAR, Utah Association of Realtors, creates addenda for us that is designed to fix things that we're currently, you know, our problem. Like a great example, of one that they did on the fly was the COVID-19 addendum. Now, some people balked at it. I thought it was very good. I thought that the only thing there, I thought Section 4 should have been able to have, rather than an automatic 30-day extension, I thought they should have been able to write in up to 30 days or so, put something in there, where, put a number of days in there. So, but the UAR had that addendum out in a few days after this all went down. So they're designed to help us, but last but not least on their creation of these addenda, they actually help us in a court of law where it protects us, where we're not, out there, just getting ourselves in trouble by writing bad language, sloppy language that can, may not cause us, if think about this, let's say you create an addendum that has really sloppy language and it harms your client. What if your client gets harmed $20,000? Well, I got a strong feeling they're going to be suing us. It's like, hello, we harm them. They're coming after their money. So, so don't do it. Call me and I'll help you if it's a complex one that's not already written. Right. So, so that's that. Let's see. Next one is conflict between what is on the MLS and what is in the REPC. And I don't know why there's a conflict there. I guess it's a part of the complaints, right? If the MLS says the refrigerator's included, but the REPC doesn't say the refrigerator's included, then the refrigerator's not included. The REPC trumps the MLS document. Got it? The MLS is an advertisement. It's not a contract. Well, let me rephrase that. For the most part, the MLS printout sheet is not a contract. There is a contract in the MLS printout, and that is the BAC being offered by the listing broker to the buyer's broker. That is a contract. So that's another reason why you should always, you should always have, a lot of agents will submit the MLS printout with their offer. Now, it won't guarantee you to get personal property that may have been missed on the REPC. However, it will guarantee you the BAC that's there. If you change the BAC, you cannot change the BAC once an offer is in play. And you need permission from the seller to change it. So you can't just willy-nilly change it. So I hope that makes sense. And then next one is multiple offers disclosed without seller approval. Oop. So you actually need the seller's permission to disclose whether there's multiple offers. Most people don't realize that, and it's not law. It's in the Code of Ethics. So we have law, and then we have Code of Ethics, which is in addition to the law, meaning making the law, and because we have the Code of Ethics, because you have 50 states and territories and such, that each state may have a little different. So what the NAR Code of Ethics did was it piled on top of the law and then kind of uniformed us in, kind of our rules, if you will, because it's not law, but we've agreed to it. I've agreed as a broker when I joined the NAR, and all my agents are going to be members of the NAR. So therefore, you've agreed to it as well when you join the Board of Realtors. So the Association of Realtors. So anyway, so the Code of Ethics is where we will not disclose without seller's permission. Now, it doesn't say in writing. Now, and I've considered another one of my spare time projects is I want to add a clause to our office contract, listing contract, that puts in there that we have the permission to disclose and we're going to manage multiple offers the best way we see fit. So check dog run. REPC says dog run, but it's actually a dog park. Well, so do I need an addendum? No, one of the clauses in the very beginning of that, I think, what's that, section 1.2, right? I think, right? So in the inclusions, the first line says, if present and owned. So if an item is not present and it's not owned, for example, if the solar panels are leased, then they're not automatically, right? Because the argument is, if real property is automatically included unless excluded, and personal property is automatically excluded unless the contract includes it. So then you walk up to a property that's for sale and you see solar panels on the roof. Are they real property? Most of the times I get the answer is yes, but they can be based on it, based on first blush, because real property because it's permanently attached. So that annexation of those panels would lead you to believe that they're included. It's real property. It's part of the contract. However, the REPC is clear that says if present and owned. So they have to own it. If they're leased or not included, you'd have to use the solar panel addendum to figure out how that's going to change hands. But the other thing is in there, if you'll notice that all the appliances have a plural, right? Refrigerators, washers, dryers, they're all in the plural. Now, that doesn't mean you owe somebody 2 washers, 2 dryers, 2 refrigerators. What it means is if there's 2 refrigerators present and owned by the seller, then yes, they're now included if it says refrigerators included. So does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah, so I think Marie's question was, in order to be totally clear about the REPC, does she need to
Right.
put an addendum in there? That,
That says an addendum that, so let me get this. If MLS check dog run, REPC says dog run, but it's actually a dog park. Yeah, it's not going to hurt. I mean, it's not going to hurt. I mean, there is no, and this is for a townhouse, so there's no real dog run included. I wouldn't have put it in the MLS. I'd have maybe put it in the remarks. I certainly wouldn't have put it in the inclusions. But the REPC, I mean, it never hurts to get clarity. Always move towards clarity. Always move towards clarity.
and the other thing that I would suggest too is when you autofill those forms on a REPC, a lot of times it will include things that you don't necessarily want included. So read through there before you print it out and make sure that you're clear on everything. So if that dog run appeared on the REPC, you should have taken it out because you knew it was a dog park.
Right. So, and the other thing is too, I had something, God, squirrel, where'd it go?
Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll come back to me. I'll call you all back to a meeting at 2:30. So, no, I'm kidding. So, back to the multiple offers. So let's get back to the multiple offers, right?
Oh, I have a question, Rob.
Okay.
How would you handle that?
How would I handle what?
Agent, because this happens all the time. The agents call up and they say, do you have any offers on the property? Are there multiple offers on the property? How do you handle that?
Well, the language patterns I like to use is, and are you kidding me? In this market, I just assume there are.
Okay. So you're not really saying or
I'm not
confirming or denying it, but just
right.
saying probably.
I just told them what they needed to hear.
Yeah.
Well, and the truth is, if you're a buyer's agent, do you really need to ask if there's an offer on the property if it's under 400,000? Come on.
No, you just need to make your final and highest offer.
Right. And so, but the other thing, so there's more that goes with that in the Code of Ethics. So for example, if in the Code of Ethics it said, the Code of Ethics goes further on to say that once you do disclose there's more than one offer or there's an offer already on the table, once you've made that disclosure, you must now answer the next 2 questions if asked. That's the key, if asked. So the first question is asked, and it's really kind of the one question, if you will, comma, has anybody, are you listing agent writing any of those offers, comma, or has anybody in your company written one of those offers? So you must disclose to me if you, the listing agent, is writing one of those offers, I have a right to know. And the reason why I have that right to know is, because we're not dealing now on a level playing field. If you ever find yourself in that situation where you got multiple offers, you're the listing agent and you have an unrepresented buyer, you wrote one of the offers. The best way to handle this, the best way is to set up a meeting with the seller, myself, and all the agents have written an offer. We all sit down at a table and everybody presents their offer in front of everybody.
Yeah, I remember you telling me to do that once, and that's exactly what we had to do
Right,
because of the same thing happening.
right. Yeah, we had that situation where I was a buyer's agent. Well, there was an agent in my office at the time. I was at Keller Williams years ago, and he had a listing, and he comes to me and says, "Hey, you want to work with a buyer?" And I go, I'm like, "Well, yeah." So it was a referral, and I said, "What?" He told me that they wanted to make an offer on his listing. I'm like, "Well, why aren't you writing it up?" He goes, "I already wrote up an offer on my listing." And I asked him point blank. I said, "Well, what's the play here? Am I just helping you get your offer signed, or do I have a shot at this?" He goes, "No, you got a shot." And so I went down and met with the buyers, and what it was is they owned 2 acres on 9400 South, just west of State Street, and they were buying a house next door that had an acre. But the house next door was residential. They owned 2 acres commercial. Either they owned 2 acres and they were buying one, or they owned one and buying two. I forget which one was which. But either way, my sales pitch to them was, if you guys don't buy this, you guys are fools. And they go, "Yeah, we already know that." So anyway, so I wrote it up, and they were buying it for the land. They didn't care about the house. And so anyway, so I wrote up my offer, and then we presented them. Me, the listing agent, the broker, and the seller sat in the conference room. So I presented my offer, and then the listing agent got up. He said, "I'll be back." I'm like, "I got up and walk with him." I'm like, "Where are you going?" He tried to pull fast one. I'm like, "Hell no, get your butt back there." So he went to his room pretending like he was looking for something and came back, you know, but I wasn't letting him call his buyer. So anyway, so and I kicked his butt on the offer. So we gave the seller, like, we were closing in like 10 days, gave the seller like 30 days to stay there free, no inspection, nothing. We just wanted to look at the title report, was the only clause we had in there. So, I mean, we kicked his butt, we kicked her butt. But anyway, but that's how it worked, because if not, I mean, if I'm writing an offer and you send one over, well, my offer's going to beat yours every time. Hello. I mean, why would, so anyway, let's see what else. Next one, I should have put this one up top with all the Repsy one. Two addendum number 4, right? So you have two addenda that both have the same number, right? That's causing ambiguity and dispute. So like if you receive an offer, sometimes you receive, like I had one under contract where addendum number 2 was the contingency addendum, but it still has the line, a blank number, addendum number, and then it names the number, or it names the addendum. Even though it has a name, you still have to number them. So, and then we had a counter offer. So they had addendum 1 and addendum 2, but addendum, the subject 2 didn't have a number on it. So in my counter offer, I put in there, the subject to sale, blah, 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 addendum, it equals addendum number 2 for, and I put in there for clarity. So in our counter offer, I cleaned it up, so I always clean up offers when and it, and it's kind of, sometimes you're like, "Ah, God, do I make this guy look bad or what?" But I want clean contracts. So, I'm just going to do it. So anyway,
And
thoughts,
that goes
questions?
to the FHA addendum too. Nobody ever
Yeah,
numbers that, but it should be.
right. Well, all those named addenda, they didn't have a number. Now they did. They modified those in the last couple of years to where they can all have a number. Yeah, please number them so that there's a sequence.
Because one of the things that I check when I'm looking at contracts for payment is how many addenda and if they're all there. because if I see a counter, I know that there's another addendum.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I check to make sure that the total contract is there. And it's one of the things you guys should be checking too.
Right. And we're going to be changing policy here in the near future to where there's going to be an exact order of how we want the documents. You know, you get one of these 15, 20 page documents and you're like, God, what did the addendum 3 say? You got to scroll back. So we're going to change it to where you're going to have to present all the contracts and all the documents in a specific order. So we're not bouncing around trying to figure out what the contract says. The other one is we're starting to reach the point now where, you know, if we don't have all the paperwork, say by 3 p.m., there's no guaranteeing we're going to pay you that day. Now, it's possible we can, you know, but your file goes to the back of the pile, and then the other ones that are complete are going to move to the front of the pile. I mean, we'll make announcements of that, but, you know, it's just getting to that point where we're getting too busy as the company grows. So with that said, you know, you guys are doing an amazing job selling a lot of houses where we're creating a little bit, you know, not major growing pains, but slight little modifications. We're getting maybe a little bellyache here and there, but that's all right. I mean, these are what I call quality problems, right? But not all these common problems on the Repsy. And so anyway, any questions, thoughts, concerns, hallucinations on any of this stuff? So if not, you know, I'll stick here for a second or so. If you have any questions, more than happy to answer them. And if not, and then we will, what do you call it? We'll take off. So let me hit this. Let's see. All right. Well, anyway, that's all I got for you,
Somebody's got
boys
a
and girls.
raise of hand.
I know.
Darlene, do you want to talk, Darlene? You can unmute yourself.
Oh, I see a Q&A.
Yeah, so I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
My question has to do with the repairs after you've done your inspections.
Okay.
So it doesn't say anywhere, or maybe it does, that it has to be done by a professional. And the client that I'm dealing with now, she had repairs done, but she wasn't willing to put the amount down. And so she got the second repair, I think she did herself, and she doesn't have a receipt. I don't know how to handle that.
Well, so first of all, it does have to be handled. If you use the due diligence, resolution of due diligence, if you use that addendum, then and you had repairs in there, then yes, it does have to be handled. Because let me read exactly what that says to you. Repairs to be made by seller. So seller and buyer agree that seller will be responsible for the completion of the repairs by the settlement deadline. Let's see. Unless otherwise agreed to in writing, seller shall, through contractors, complete the repair to comply with applicable law, including governmental permit, inspection, and approval requirements. All repairs shall be performed in a workmanlike manner with materials of quality and appearances comparable to the existing materials. So if you use the resolution of due diligence addendum, then they have to be repaired by a contractor.
And if I didn't?
Well, then,
I just used a regular addendum.
So, well, then you don't have that language. Then they just have to fix it. Then it's ambiguity. So if you're in a contract, you have to be real specific. Seller to replace X, you know, not repair, because what does that mean? You know, I mean, who knows? I mean, now you're subject to whatever, you know, they put a Band-Aid on it and not really repaired. So we can talk about that later.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
because I want to see the contract and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Yep. So
anybody else? Now's a good time to ask for questions about anything.
Okay, if not,
If not, I'm going to end the meeting. You guys
yes.
have a great day.
Thanks, boys and girls. See ya.